I told you, didn't I? If anything happens, it's all on you. The manager smirks at me as he says this, taking the perfect opportunity. Before I know it, he follows up with, "You're fired." Something snaps inside me. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Revenge Office *. Today, I'm going to share a new story with you. Let's get started. My name is Chris, and I'm a 48-year-old company employee. I work as a sales manager at an industrial company that handles electronic components and metal products. I live with my wife and my daughter, who's already working. I've been studying English since I was a student, and because of that, I've handled overseas business trips without any problems. Using those skills in my current job as a sales manager, I'm responsible for many client relationships and interactions with my team, so my days are pretty hectic. But the job is fulfilling. When you work at a company, you deal with all kinds of people. Usually, after a while, you figure out how to handle each one. But there's one person I still haven't figured out how to deal with. Just because the CEO is away on an overseas trip doesn't mean you can slack off. If your team screws up, Chris, it's all your responsibility. That person is Tom, the manager. Tom transferred to our department last year from a branch office. He's younger than me, just a little over 40, and already a manager. As you can see, Tom, being a manager, takes a condescending attitude toward his subordinates and uses harsh language. Even though he was promoted to manager, you'd think he must be great at his job, but that's not the case at all. Actually, the rumor around the office is that Tom got promoted by sucking up to the company executives, not because of his abilities. Yeah, of course, everyone's staying focused and working hard, so there's nothing to worry about, I replied. Tom snorted in disapproval. We'll see about that, he muttered. Tom joined our department last year. Because of his attitude and behavior, there's still a gap between him and his subordinates. Naturally, the team turns to me, someone they're more familiar with, rather than the arrogant manager. Tom doesn't like that, and as a result, he's particularly hard on me. It started with small, petty annoyances and escalated to things like yelling insults, which honestly feel like childish bullying. I still remember the time he called me a useless idiot stuck at manager level, despite being older than me. It shocked me more than it made me angry. Lately, dealing with Tom has become a source of stress or maybe even exhaustion. I've been getting headaches. As Tom mentioned, our CEO is currently overseas on a business trip. He's visiting our factory in one of our overseas branches, probably to see things firsthand and check on various aspects of operations. The CEO isn't expected back until next week. Because of Tom's intimidating tone, the team was tense, but I tried to ease the tension by speaking up. He's only being tough because he expects a lot from everyone. As long as you all do your jobs as usual, everything will be fine. Hearing this, my team's expressions relaxed. Good, that should help everyone loosen up a bit. I also felt relieved, but what I didn't realize at the time was that Tom was glaring at me from behind with an intense expression. 3 days after that exchange with Tom, his angry voice echoed through the entire sales department. "Do you even realize what you've done?" I instinctively looked over at the manager's desk. Mike, one of the younger staff members, stood in front of Tom, his face pale. "I'm very sorry, but I'm sure No excuses. How are you going to take responsibility for this?" Without hesitation, I quickly headed over to the two of them. "Tom, did Mike do something wrong?" I asked, and Tom shot me a fierce glare. This guy totally blew off a meeting with a client. He completely forgot the meeting was today. I got a furious call directly from the client. They were interested in signing a deal, but now they're reconsidering. Absolutely unacceptable. How long has he been doing this job? Mike has been with the company for 3 years now. He's become quite reliable and has gotten used to the work. As his boss, I know him well. Mike is serious and meticulous. Would he really make such a careless mistake and forget about the meeting? Chris, I swear I didn't mix up the schedule. The meeting with the client is next week. It's true, Mike said, clearly stressed. I tried to calm things down. Right, first we need to confirm with the client if it was really a mix-up on Mike's part. We'll apologize sincerely. As his manager, I'll be there with him. At my words, Tom's eyebrows shot up. Confirm. Are you implying that I'm lying? I told you before, Chris, if anything goes wrong, it's all on you. Tom grinned smugly. The entire sales department was on edge from the tension. Chris has nothing to do with this, Tom. I'll go apologize to the client right now, so please, I'm talking to Chris right now. Don't act on your own. Tom cut Mike off. Then he turned to me, his voice dripping with resentment. Chris, I've always thought you were a problem. Even though I'm the manager, you keep undermining me, making it seem like the team trusts you more than me. Are you trying to play the good boss? Tom's words, which felt like his true feelings, made me flinch. That was never my intention. In fact, I've always tried to mediate between him and the team, knowing he's the type of boss they tend to dislike. Tom's next words caught me off guard. Since I got the call directly from the client, I know how this is going to turn out. No matter what we do, their opinion won't change. Chris, you're fired. The word *fired* sent a wave of murmurs through the department. Mike, in a panic, said, if anyone's responsible, it's me. But Tom wasn't listening. He just kept smirking at me. Something felt off. Tom, regardless of his position as a manager, didn't have the authority to fire anyone on his own. My thoughts raced, and everything pointed to the same conclusion. Tom had always hated me. He was using this moment as an excuse to push me out. I felt something snap inside me. I stopped Mike, who was still protesting, and slowly shook my head. I'll submit my resignation tomorrow. I see. Then I'll take full responsibility and apologize to the client myself. Mike, you can step back. The client doesn't even want to see your face, so sending you to apologize would only make things worse. Stay away from them. I will never forget the smug grin Tom had on his face at that moment. But I wasn't giving in. Not to Tom. Without knowing what I was thinking, he narrowed his eyes in satisfaction. That evening, I told my family I was quitting my job. I expected them to be shocked, maybe even disappointed, but their reaction was completely unexpected. They did look surprised at first, just as I thought. But then my daughter smiled and said, "That's great. I've always thought you were working too hard, Dad. You've been complaining about headaches lately, too. I think it's a good idea to take it easy for a while. Oh, but it'd be nice if you helped out around the house more." My wife nodded in agreement. "Both of us are working full-time, so we'll manage if you slow down a bit." Don't look so gloomy like it's the end of the world. Relax a little." Their unexpected kindness brought tears to my eyes. "Dad, are you crying?" "No, of course not. But thanks," I said, turning my face away. I could hear my wife and daughter laughing, wrapped in my family's kindness. I felt the tension leave my shoulders for the first time in a while. A few days after I submitted my resignation, something unexpected happened. I found myself sitting on the couch in the CEO's office at the company I had quit. The CEO sat on the couch opposite me and a little further away. Tom was kneeling on the floor. From an outsider's perspective, it would have looked like a bizarre scene. I was currently using my accumulated paid vacation, but the CEO had personally contacted me, asking if I could come to the office. Honestly, I didn't think I had any reason to go back, but I understood why the CEO, who had been abroad on a business trip, might be confused. I also felt a bit guilty about not properly saying goodbye after all the years I'd worked for the company, so I decided to go. I was shocked when I heard Tom's story. I mean, what right did he have to think he could fire you? The CEO glanced briefly at Tom as he spoke in disbelief. Apparently, the CEO had sought me out first thing after returning from his overseas trip for a very specific reason. When he asked Tom about my whereabouts, Tom smugly replied, "I fired Chris to hold him responsible for the trouble that occurred while you were away. That useless guy has always been all talk, and as a manager, I've been struggling to deal with him for a long time. I feel so relieved he's finally gone." Tom had explained everything with a smug expression on his face, or so I was told. Technically, I had submitted my resignation, so I left voluntarily, but let's set that aside for now. When the CEO found out I was no longer with the company, his face turned pale. "Chris, without him, the $23 million deal is off the table." "Tom, what have you done?" The CEO was in shock, while Tom reportedly responded with a confused, "What?" It turns out that during the CEO's overseas trip, he visited a company we do business with for a separate matter. Since I was fluent in English, I had handled business with this client during my younger years, and they had become one of my most important accounts. The CEO of the overseas company had proposed a new deal during that visit. Seeing the potential, our CEO enthusiastically agreed. However, the overseas CEO made one request. "I trust your company, but the reason I first decided to do business with you was because of Chris's character. I'd like him to handle this deal again." Unaware that I had been fired by Tom, our CEO happily agreed, saying, "Of course. Is that so?" I was just as surprised, since this was news to me. Tom, on the other hand, turned pale and muttered, "That's impossible." The CEO continued, "Tom, you might not know this, but since Chris joined the company, he's closed numerous deals. Your assessment of him as just all talk is far from accurate." Tom's throat tightened, and he lowered his head at the CEO's suggestive words. At that moment, a soft knock sounded at the door. It was Mike, who entered. "I asked him to come, since he's involved in your resignation," the CEO said. As soon as Mike entered, he glared at the manager sitting on the floor and handed an envelope to the CEO. Mike spoke. "Even though the manager tried to stop me, I went to apologize to the client. To my surprise, I found out something unexpected. The client's schedule was exactly as I remembered. Inside the envelope were the records of his communication with their representative." Tom's head snapped up. Mike glanced at him and snorted. "It's a shame you tried to block me from contacting the client. After confirming with them, it turns out that the mistake you blamed me for was completely fabricated. The meeting schedule didn't change, but for some reason, the client contact was switched from me to you. Care to explain that, Tom?" "Tom, explain yourself," the CEO demanded. Even though it wasn't hot, sweat was forming on Tom's forehead. His eyes darted around as if he was desperately searching for a way out. "Stop being so stubborn. Why don't you get it off your chest and tell the whole story?" I said, and Tom cursed under his breath, slamming his fist on the floor. Apparently, Tom had been plotting to get rid of me for quite some time. Since I was meticulous in my work and didn't give him any openings, he figured it would be easier to fabricate a mistake by one of my subordinates who had just started getting used to the job. His plan was to first make a fuss over Mike's supposed mistake, pin the responsibility on me, and get me fired. Then he'd make sure Mike didn't deal with the client by coming up with some excuse, and Tom would handle the negotiations himself. If the deal succeeded, he could boast, "It's because I apologized so sincerely." If it failed, he'd simply say it was Mike's mistake after all. That was his scheme, and if Mike became a nuisance, he figured he could fire him just as easily as he did with me. It's truly appalling what kind of man Tom is. No wonder he didn't rush to have Mike apologize despite all the fuss he made. My sense of unease had been spot on. Chris would take responsibility if he thought his subordinate made a mistake. Tom explained. I couldn't help but mutter, "Pathetic." Tom heard me, and his glare sharpened as he let his emotions boil over. "I'm the manager. I'm higher up than you, yet you're stuck at manager level, and everyone still treats you like a big deal. I can do my job too. What's the difference between you and me?" His voice gradually took on a tearful tone as he rambled about how no one seemed to appreciate his hard work. Honestly, if anyone had the right to cry, it was me and Mike, who had a fake mistake pinned on him. What a pathetic excuse for a rant. If you had been more sincere with your subordinates, they would have naturally come to rely on you, I said. Mike nodded in agreement. All the manager ever did was insult us whenever he opened his mouth, constantly lowering team morale. He even dumped his own work on us. There was a time when Chris spoke to HR on behalf of everyone, but they never took it seriously because of Tom's influence. "Hey, stop it. Don't just make things up," Tom snapped, trying to silence his subordinate with a glare. But under the stares from me and the CEO, his expression soared, and he lowered his head again. The CEO, who had been silently listening, finally spoke. "That's enough. I understand everything. Tom, I approved your promotion because I heard you were competent and capable, but it's clear your character is not fit for this role. I share the blame for not recognizing that sooner. Chris, Mike, I'm deeply sorry." The CEO stood up and apologized deeply to both Mike and me. We hurriedly tried to get him to raise his head, but he refused to budge. I hadn't seen the CEO in a long time and had almost forgotten that he was known for hating dishonesty more than anything. It wasn't just Tom's actions he was upset about. He was also angry at himself for promoting Tom to manager. I turned to Tom, who was still looking down. "You know who you really owe an apology to." Tom gritted his teeth in frustration, but eventually he gave up, placed his hands on the floor, and muttered, "I'm sorry," in a raspy voice. Tom finally muttered an apology, but deep down, I could tell he was still thinking. Why me? He wasn't crying out of remorse, but out of frustration. As long as you're still thinking, "Why is this happening to me?" you won't grow no matter where you go or what you do, I said. Maybe my words hit too close to home because Tom's eyes widened and he started clawing at his head. Later on, Tom was fired for cause. The executives who helped him rise in the ranks, as well as the HR staff who were under his influence, were also held accountable and faced consequences. After a lot of deliberation, I decided to return to the company as the CEO had requested. This whole ordeal was the result of Tom's rogue actions, and the CEO wasn't to blame. Since there was still some time before the overseas negotiation, and with the CEO's encouragement, I decided to take a little more time off. As my daughter had pointed out, my health had been deteriorating, so this was the perfect opportunity to rest. During my time off, I'm planning to consult with a lawyer, along with Mike, and file a claim for damages against Tom. When I first decided to submit my resignation, I had also made up my mind to seek legal advice regarding Tom. While my wife and daughter said, "You could have just quit for real," I enjoy working and don't want to become a burden to my family. I'll make sure to fully recover, and then I'll be ready to take on the negotiations in top form.